Hey there, ENG3U. This is Faisal, your teacher talking. And today we're going to be talking about Banquo, specifically the death of Banquo. So, as you all should know, Banquo gets himself murdered in Act 3, Scene 3, line... Oh, I didn't put the line... Line... 20... let me just put that there. So, that's on page 133 of your book. So, Banquo was killed by 3 murderers that Macbeth has hired. These guys don't have names. You don't really have to worry about any specifics about them. They're murderers. They're bad people. They like to kill people. What else is there to say? Now, the important thing in this scene is just something very simple, which is what Banquo says right here. He says, "O treachery, fly, good Fleance, fly, fly, fly. Thou mayest revenge, O slave." And then, of course, they stab him nice and good, and that's it for Banquo, right? So he's dead, but his son, who will remember, is the subject of the witch's prophecy, the one who's going to be the king, right? Banquo's the father of kings, so the son is Fleance, so Fleance is going to be a king. He's the one that escapes, so this is very important because it means that even though Macbeth has killed Banquo, right, the prophecy is still in effect, right? He's still not able to escape that prophecy because, well, Fleance is still alive and well here, right? So that's the important thing for that particular scene. And it should be noted real quick, because I've had some students in the past, not you guys, but, you know, previous classes that have said, well, Fleance is such a coward, right? He's only a little kid. Why can't he fight some of these murderers and save his father from these terrible murderers? No, not like that. It's not like he's abandoning his father there, right? Because he is, as you might remember from the film version, very small. He's a young man. So he is not abandoning his father. He's just trying to save his own life because, well, he can't take on 3 murderers. So, Banquo's dead, and Fleance is now in hiding, right? Hiding from Macbeth's murderers here. So, Macbeth only gets half the job done, right? He's got Banquo dead, but Fleance is still out there, and honestly, of the 2 of them, he probably wants to kill Fleance more, because, well, it's Fleance who's going to be king, not Banquo. But nevertheless, the murderers only do half of the work. And we see Macbeth's reaction to this in Act 3, Scene 4, line 10, which is on page 141 of your textbook, where Macbeth, talking to one of the murderers here, says, "My lord, his throat is cut. I did for him. Thou art the best of the cutthroats, yet he's good that did like for Fleance. If thou didst, thou art the nonpareil. Most royal sir, Fleance escaped. Then comes my fit again. I had else been perfect, whole as marble, founded as the rock, as broad and general as the casing air. But now I am cabined, confined, bound in to saucy doubts and fears. But Banquo's safe. Ay, my good lord, safe in a ditch he bides, with 20 trench gashes on his head, the least a death to nature." So, Macbeth, I like doing that, Macbeth has killed his best friend, and the plan has screwed up. So first of all, maybe it would have been better if he'd consulted with Lady Macbeth, right? Maybe she could have come up with a better plan. But that aside, he has now nevertheless murdered his best friend for no real reason. And he gets the news of his having murdered his son right before this very fancy banquet that he's going to have with all of his highly ranked chums over there, right? So Macbeth has that sort of fresh on his mind there as he goes in to the banquet, which of course brings us to the ghost. So take a look at Act 3, Scene 4, line 49, which is on page 143 of your textbook, right? We have Macbeth give this speech, let me find it here, about a ghost, right? And if you've seen the play, and I know obviously I can't really show it in this situation, but if you've seen the play, then you know that this ghost of Banquo, or something that looks apparently like Banquo, enters the room and it sits in Macbeth's seat over in the banquet, right? So that Macbeth can't sit down, right? So he's seeing this ghost that only he can see, right? All the other people in the room are not able to see that ghost. So Macbeth sees this ghost, and he, of course, freaks out because, well, he's literally seen a ghost. And he says, "Blood hath been shed ere now, in the olden time, ere human statuette purged the gentle wheel. Aye, and since too murders have been performed, too terrible for the ear, the times have been that, when the brains were out, the man would die, and there an end. But now they rise again, with 20 mortal murders on their crowns, and push us from our stools. This is more strange than such a murder is." So, that speech right there, right, and that entire freakout that he's having is not a soliloquy, right? So, everyone in the room is hearing this king that they have, their brand new king, having a public breakdown about a ghost that only he can see. And I don't think I have to ask you guys, if your king is talking to ghosts that only he can see, then your country is in trouble, right? So Macbeth here is making the other Thanes very nervous. Because you know what? It's one thing to have an evil king, right? The king who's gonna kill his enemies in the night, right? That's one thing. But it's something else entirely to have a king that is completely insane. So what we see here is this is the beginning of the breakdown of Macbeth's power, right? All of a sudden, all those Thanes that were so eager to suck up to him and so eager to, bend the knee and make sure that they were on the same page as Macbeth, well, now they're thinking, uh-oh, hang on, this guy's nuts. We got a nutty king here, and I was willing to put up with him when he was just, killing his enemies and all of that stuff, but now he's talking about ghosts. Uh-oh, I might need to do something about this, right? And this is where, we see the seeds of rebellion against Macbeth start to begin. Because, again, I'll repeat it. It's one thing to be evil, right? To have an evil king, sure, but to have an insane king, that's crazy, right? You don't want to have an insane king, right? Because you never know what the king is going to do. But let's get back to the ghost. So, the big question is, of course, what is a ghost? I've never seen a ghost before. What's a ghost? So I mentioned at the beginning of our unit, and I'll mention it again now, that Shakespeare's audience is sort of split in half along religious grounds, and they're also split in half in terms of their theology and the way they sort of look at the world. So the Catholic side of Shakespeare's audience thinks that this is a real ghost, as in that thing in the chair is the actual spirit of Banquo that has returned from the grave, or maybe purgatory, and that it's here to haunt him because he's, angry at him, right? He's angry at Macbeth. You killed me. I'm upset about that, so I'm going to come back from the grave to haunt you, right? Meanwhile, the Protestant side of Shakespeare's audience does not think that's an actual ghost, right? Protestants don't believe in that, at least in Shakespeare's time. They think instead that it's either going to be a devil that has taken the form of a ghost to trick him, or it's some kind of hallucination from his mind. And there is no firm answer to that in the play, right? There's no point in the play where Shakespeare says, yes, it's actually Banquo, or no, it's a devil, right? That's always kept what we call ambiguous. So, that'll bring us to a question for you guys. What do you think this thing is? Is it meant to be a actual ghost? Is that the ghost of Banquo that's come back to life? Or is it some sort of hallucination? You tell me what you think. Send me an email at faisal.ahmed@tdsb.on.ca and we'll discuss what exactly this thing may or may not be, right? But regardless, no matter what it is, it does cause Macbeth to completely freak out, right? And that's where his wife, Lady Macbeth, steps in to do damage control. So, take a look, if you don't mind, at Act 3, Scene 4, line 74, which is on page 145 of your textbook. So, Lady Macbeth says, "Oh, proper stuff. This is the very painting of your fear. This is the air-drawn dagger which you said led you to Duncan. Oh, these flaws and starts, impostors to true fear, would well become a woman's story at a winter's fire, authorized by her grandam. Shame itself! Why do you make such faces? When all's done, you look but on a stool." And she also says, "What, quite unmanned and folly? Or, my worthy lord, your noble friends do lack you." That one's not so bad. So, you see, what she's doing there in those speeches, when she's saying things like, sit noteworthy friends, my lord is often thus, and hath been from his youth, pray you keep seat, the fit is momentary, upon a thought he will again be well, if much you note him, you shall avenge him and extend his passion, feed and regard him not, are you a man? Right? What you see her doing there is sort of managing the room. She's trying to do damage control, right? She's covering for Macbeth here, right? So she sees, alright, my husband's freaking out. He thinks there's a ghost over there. And she's doing her best to keep him on point, say, hey, come on, we've got guests here, right? And she's also doing her best to minimize the damage here. So once again, Lady Macbeth here is proving that she's got the brains here, right? Because she knows that if Macbeth freaks out in front of all of these thanes, right, these very powerful men in the kingdom, then they're going to think he's crazy, right? And he's going to lose support, and he may even face some rebellion. So Lady Macbeth here is once again sort of taking or trying to take control of the situation, while Macbeth is, again, depending on your perspective, either haunted by a ghost or just plain old hallucinating, right? So you could sort of look at it as being similar to the earlier scene with the daggers, where Macbeth, walks around with all those bloody daggers, doesn't put them where they're supposed to go, all of that stuff, but then ends up being saved by Lady Macbeth, who steps in, takes control of the situation, and makes sure those daggers go where they're supposed to go. So, from Lady Macbeth's perspective, these are two things that happened. So first, Macbeth cut her out of his lands and said, "Oh, be innocent of the knowledge, gentle chuck," and all of that stuff that we talked about yesterday. Right? But now here he is, raving and ranting about ghosts. So, let's ask a question. If you were Lady Macbeth, how do you think you would feel seeing your husband like this? Right? Considering the situation, considering everything he's been saying and everything like that, how do you think Lady Macbeth would feel about her husband at this juncture? So you can email me your answer, faisal.ahmed@tdsb.on.ca, right? Send me your answer and I will gladly take a look at it for tonight's question and answer video. After all of this dinner business, right, it's time for the nobles to sort of reconsider their options, right? People like Thane Ross, Thane Lennox, right? All of those characters who are minor characters by themselves, but all of them have to sort of ask a question, like, okay, what am I doing with this guy? And what many of them are going to now do is they're going to head south, right, out of Scotland, down to England to join up with Malcolm, who is Duncan's son, along with a man called Macduff. So some of you might remember Macduff from right after the death of Duncan, right? He was the man who was asking Macbeth, well, why are you killing the two guards or the grooms so quickly, right? You shouldn't have done that, right? So that's who Macduff is, and he is going to be one of the most important characters for us in this play. But we will talk about him tomorrow. So, thanks for tuning in, guys. Send me any questions that you have, and I will post again later tonight. So until then, I'll see you guys after a while.